I'm Lexy Davis, a love embodiment coach who helps people create a love that feels like home, and I'm here to bring more romance and playfulness into the world. I'm also an international retreat host, vibe curator, and human connector. I serve people through my business, Alive to Enjoy, and this podcast where I invite guests from around the world to sprinkle their wisdom and expand your perspective so you can create the deepest love you possibly can reach in this lifetime. I also want you to live the most joyous life, whatever that looks like to you, and I hope that this slice of the internet brings you lots of smiles and helps you keep your heart open. Thank you for choosing Heart Snuggles to be in your ears each week, and I'm so glad you're here with me. Welcome, Heart Snugglers. So grateful to have you back with us today. And I brought an amazing woman with us. She has an incredible book, which you all need to read, called The Empowered Wife, and many other books as well. And I'm so excited to show you the way that she views the world and relationships. So please tell them a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I was the perfect wife in every way, but then I got married and things kind of went downhill from there. When I was newly married, I just wanted my husband to be more ambitious and more romantic and tidier. So I was trying to help him be all those things. I was telling him how he could improve himself. And not surprising now that I tell the story, he wanted nothing to do with me. He was very distant. And you know what? A relationship that was making me so happy when we were newlyweds was now feeling really painful. I couldn't get him to have a conversation with me or take a car ride with me or even physical intimacy. He just wasn't interested. So it was very heartbreaking, but I knew what to do. I knew that we should go to marriage counseling because everyone knows that's what you have to do when you can't even have a conversation without getting into an argument, a big blow up. So we went to marriage counseling for over a year. And I was on the counselor's gray couch when I realized it was hopeless. He was never going to change. And I was either going to spend the rest of my life in a loveless relationship, feeling lonely and rejected and worthless, really, or I was going to have to get divorced. So I decided to get divorced. But the problem was I was too embarrassed to get divorced. So I thought, as a last ditch effort, I'm going to ask women who have happy relationships what their secret is. And I did that. And the things that they told me made my head explode. They sounded crazy, to be honest. Like, it didn't make any sense. And it wasn't what I had seen growing up. But my parents are divorced. So I had been following a failed recipe. It wasn't like the things I learned in marriage counseling or in all the marriage books I'd read. But I thought, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to experiment with their ideas to see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I just remember it was not too long after that I walked through the door and my husband saw me come in and his face lit up. So he was happy to see me again. And that had been gone. So I thought, this is working. There's something to this. And I was really excited because I thought, now I'm going to be able to have the kind of marriage I always wanted. I mean, I've wanted a good marriage so bad. And I was excited to be able to have that because now I knew what to do. I thought, we're not going to have these big fights anymore or these cold wars where there's no talking for days. And so it was not too long after that we were driving in the car and we had a big blow up, a huge blow up. I was saying horrible things. He was saying horrible things. I was saying things I knew I was going to regret later. And I was crushed because I thought this wasn't going to happen anymore. And then it did. Mm-hmm. And I had this idea that I wanted to get my friends to start doing the things I'd learned from these happy wives with me because I wasn't able to get myself to do them at first. So, and it wasn't that the new way was so hard. It was new. Mm-hmm. And so I got a little support group in my living room and we started practicing what I call the intimacy skills now and together, and they were seeing miracles. So we were all just seeing miracles. It was pretty incredible. And I remember one woman was like, my husband won the sales contest at work and he took her on the most romantic trip of their lives. And another one said, you're not going to think this is a big deal, but we've been fighting about my husband painting the family room for months. And he got up and painted the family room and he did it like happily. She's like, this is a miracle. And we were all like, yeah, that is a miracle, definitely. And so someone said, could you write down what we're doing for my cousin in Florida? And I'm in California. And I was like, sure, I will write it down. And that became my first book, which was then, it debuted as a New York Times bestseller. It was number one on Amazon. It was published in 19 languages in 30 countries. And it started this worldwide movement of women who practice the intimacy skills. I was just trying to save my marriage, but it's been really gratifying. Now I've certified hundreds of Laura Doyle relationship coaches who are experts on those skills. And, I have the Empowered Wife podcast where we talk about the intimacy skills every week. So it's just taken on a life of its own, but such a thrilling one because to this day, I still need a community of women who are practicing them to keep my own marriage shiny and amazing, which it absolutely is now. It would have been so tragic if I had divorced the man of my dreams that I'm married to now, who is always, he's always taking my picture for one thing. Like I'll be brushing crumbs off the counter in the kitchen and he is like, oh, don't move. And he gets out his phone and starts taking my picture like I'm the supermodel he's been married to for 35 years. So now I'm on a mission to end world divorce by showing as many women as possible the intimacy skills that they can use to make their marriages playful and passionate.
So beautiful. It makes me just like my heart sing because it's so opposite of what you hear, and it's always like, leave him, dump him. There's so much male shaming and just like exiting. It's such an easy way out. So when I discovered your work, I was like, this is what's true for me and what is like what, I want to teach people as well. And so I'm just so grateful. And before we dive into all that, I want to first ask the first questions of the podcast. And the first one is, what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
Oh, it was on Saturday. I was sick in bed and I had to cancel beach volleyball. And the meaning of life is to play as much beach volleyball as you possibly can. And our friends Mike and Yuki came over to the house with a fresh baked loaf of jalapeno cheese sourdough bread. I mean, a phenomenal loaf of bread. And they brought it. And, my husband went to the door to get it from them because I was stuck in my bed. But anyway, it was amazing that they did that for me. Yeah, I mean, I really, really enjoyed that loaf of bread. So thank you, Mike and Yuki.
So cute. I love when people do. It's always the small acts that are just like, that are warm you in those moments. So that's a beautiful one. And the next question is, what relationship belief or behavior did you have to change or unlearn so you could have a deeper connection with your lover?
Well, I think a huge one for me was I was a big time complainer. I just thought that that was the only way. I thought if you are unhappy with something, you have to let people know. You have to be honest. And by honest, I meant critical. And I used to think of complaining also as kind of a way to connect with other people. Like, isn't this awful? Aren't we in this together? And now I just don't see it that way anymore. So I think one of the big eye-opening, life-changing transformations that I went through when my marriage was really broken was learning that complaining actually never serves me. And I'd heard Gandhi say that. Gandhi's like, never complain, change what you can or something. And I was like, how do you do that? You just stuff it all down? I don't get it. But now I take great pleasure in being able to express my desires in a way that inspires instead of complaining. And it's a formula that I wish I had known since I was like a little girl. And I would love to, teach that formula today, actually, if there's time on the podcast. I just feel like every woman needs to know how to do that. Saying complaining is actually like a lazy desire. That's what I've learned. Like if I'm unhappy with something, it means there's something that I would love that I'm not expressing. It's incumbent on me to figure that out and to say it in such a way that other people can hear me. Because people, I think, don't even hear you when you're complaining. They can't hear me for sure. So yeah, it would be turning those lazy desires from complaints into expressions that inspire others around me.
Yes, that's such a good one. I mean, I recognize it. I always notice if I don't notice myself when I'm complaining, exactly when I do, based on how my man gets defensive and responds to me. So I'm like, okay, I must have just done one of the things that pushes him away. So Yeah, I'd love for you to share with us the beautiful way that.
Sure. Well, so there's a little story about this, which is in the bad old days of my marriage, one of the things that we used to fight a lot about was dishes. And I remember saying to him, like, I cooked, you have to do the dishes. And then I would just say, would you please do the dishes? Or I would say, you have to do the dishes. Or I make like a little Excel spreadsheet, and put it on the fridge. Like, your chores, my chores, yours are dishes. And
Yeah.
I mean, none of it worked. Like he just would not do the dishes. And I remember saying, like complaining about it, right? Like, John, this kitchen is a disaster area. And I think he probably just heard John, blah, 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 right? Because he couldn't hear the complaint. But I thought he was going to jump off the couch and start doing the dishes, and that just never happened. So finally, one day I said, I used the formula, and it is, I would love a clean kitchen. And I'll break down that formula in a minute. But he said, okay, I'll do the dishes, I'll clean the kitchen. And he did. And I was like, what's happening right now? And then, oh, it's like even more shocking. He's been doing it ever since. It's been like over 20 years. And he does it because it makes his wife happy. So on the other side of that, I'm also bringing lots of gratitude. I'm always saying like, oh my gosh, look at this kitchen. It's ridiculously clean. And he just beams. He just loves, and he looks around for more things to do that will make me happy. And so this is the formula for really triggering your husband's hero gene. It's to say, I would love, or I mean, I love the word love, but if you're feeling like that's too extreme, you could say, I would like. I think love's more effective, but you could say, I would like. And then you just say the final outcome. So one mistake I used to make was getting a little control mixed in with my desire, and that just never works. Like I would say, I would love a new dress for my birthday. And there's one in the window at Macy's, and I wear a size 8. And wait till it goes on sale. And I would just give all these little instructions. And then he was more like my subordinate, like my employee or something. And it wasn't inspiring at all. So there's some vulnerability in expressing desires in a way that inspires, because you're leaving it to him to decide how it's going to be done. Like I've had students say like, well, I expressed my desire for a clean kitchen, and he gets the kids to clean it. He didn't clean it himself, So you just never know exactly how they're going to meet that desire. But that's part of the adventure and the excitement of being in a relationship. Otherwise you could do everything yourself and have it done your way, that's kind of where I was stuck in the bad old days. And now it's just a thrill to see my husband's hero gene is so strong and thriving when I thought he didn't care about my happiness at all. I had so much power to have a much better response from him.
Yeah, and I love that it is in your control in that way to
Yeah.
elicit that sort of response in him. And yes, that's what I love to show people and practice myself, because it never works when you continue to control. And there were so many times, even just recently, where I didn't realize I was controlling, and my man would literally tell me, "Stop trying to control me." And I was like, "I'm not trying to control you." He's like, "You're telling me what I should or shouldn't do. That is controlling." And I was like, "Oh, it's so subtle." So yeah, I think that's
Yeah. It's an awful feeling when they bust you like that, right? Like I'm always like, no, don't notice I'm controlling. But of course
yeah.
they do. They're really tuned in. My husband's really tuned in too. I can't get away with anything anymore.
Never. Yeah, no. But with that, I have a question. So what if your man tells you that it's your responsibility to do the dishes and that.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's your responsibility. Well, so that's interesting, right? Like, I think, of course, every relationship is different. And I just know for me, like, when I'm approaching my relationship with like a sense of gratitude for the things that he's contributing and also a vulnerability. Another thing that I did in the early days was I thought that my worth as a wife was going to be on how much I accomplished, how well I kept the house and how much money I saved us on, shopping. And yeah, I thought that my worth was tied into that. And so another aspect of what came up for me when my husband started doing the dishes was it wasn't actually very comfortable for me to have him do the dishes
Mm,
because there was part of me that believed it was my job to
mm,
do that, and I felt some guilt. And so it was a stretch at first. Not so much anymore. I'm used to it now. But it was at first. And so it's interesting to kind of look at, and I've had other things like this too, where I'll think I have a strong desire. Like I had for a long time, I wanted a pool, and I would be like, oh yeah, I want a pool. But I really wasn't owning that desire. I was kind of holding it at arm's length. So I was just sort of pining after a pool, like, I wish I had a pool, but not really honoring myself the way that I finally got to, which was there was finally a day when I was like, you know what, I would love a pool. And when I owned that desire, all of a sudden my husband was activated and he went into action. And now I call it a backyard resort. What I have now, it's like incredible, beautiful pool. And the truth was, I felt guilty. I felt a little undeserving of a pool. I remember thinking, like, if only we had kids, I could say we need the pool for them instead of having to have the desire for something so indulgent myself. So it's interesting to me that sometimes when I think my husband is doing to me, or, he's not allowing me to something, to kind of look at how I'm talking to myself.
mhm,
So no one can define my responsibilities except for me, right? And of course, when I'm in a marriage, of course, you're constantly having negotiations about who's responsible for what. But if I'm just really getting clear on what's on my paper and showing up, so kind of back to that vulnerable way of explaining things. Like I remember one student was telling me recently, they woke up in the morning and her husband said, hey, do you want to take our boys swimming today? And she was so tired. She was like, she didn't want to agree to it because she just didn't have the energy. So she just said to him, she's like, oh, I am just so tired today. She's like, I would love to rest. And he goes, no problem. He's like, you stay in bed. I'm going to get up with the boys. And then he took those kids she said, for hours, for longer than normal, I suppose. And then by the time it was time to go swimming, she felt pretty rested. And he was like, do you want to go swimming now? And she was like, yeah. And they all went and they had a great time. So because she was vulnerable and admitted she was tired versus maybe getting up and pushing through and sometimes getting cranky, she got a very different response from him. So in this hypothetical situation of the husband saying the dishes are your responsibility, I think there's like an opportunity to explore the desires of your heart and also your own vulnerability and limits to trigger that hero gene in your husband. Or it might just be about, yeah, being able to honor that you need a break, or that you're just at your limit for today. Like, I can't do the dishes today is a vulnerable phrase that I've learned to lean on, even though I was raised to know that I could do anything. And my siblings and I were like, we go, I could do anything. And the truth is, I can't do everything. I can do anything, but not everything. And sometimes I need to just set my limits.
yes, I love that. And that's such a permission for women because we're not told to be able to say those things and to displease our lover. So, yeah, that's so beautiful. And then that also, I can hear this voice that's like, well, what if I tell him I'm tired, but then he just says, well, all you did was you were at home all day. How could you be tired when I went out and worked and da 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 da?
So, ouch. First of all, ouch. It's incredibly hurtful, right? To have your efforts dismissed and not acknowledged. And this just kind of reminds me of another skill that I feel like is the most powerful of the 6 intimacy skills, actually. And I'll tell you a little story about this. I had a student early on where she was in my workshop, and we had the assignment for the week was to give your husband 3 gratitudes a day. And so her name was Isabella, and she raised her hand. She's like, yeah, excuse me. First of all, I do everything, so I don't see what I'm going to be able to thank him for. And second of all, nobody's thanking me. So why should I do this? But she agreed she was going to experiment with expressing 3 gratitudes a day. And so the first day she thanked him for taking out the trash, and she thanked him for working hard to support the family, even though she worked too. And then he watched their baby while she went to her exercise class. So she thanked him for that. And by the second day, they were sitting down to dinner, and turned to her and said, you've really taught me that we need to appreciate each other more. And I want to thank you for making dinner tonight.
Oh,
So I know she just like fell out of her chair. She was just melting. So in 24 hours, she created a culture of gratitude in her home where they both were appreciating each other more. So for me, when having your husband dismiss your efforts or, saying that you're not doing enough, it could be, and I'm not saying like it's the right way to do it. It's certainly not at all, but it could be kind of a plea for a culture of gratitude, some appreciation for all the contributions that you're both making, right? And it doesn't hurt to be the first one to start with expressing that appreciation, which does double duty because it not only changes your own heart and starts to make you realize, like, wow, this guy is actually doing a lot to lighten my load. It also gives you a better response because people love to be appreciated.
yes. And the beautiful thing is like being the one that chooses to be loved and chooses to make that brave, loving choice without needing him to do it first. And I feel like that stubbornness gets us nowhere. And it can be really tempting to like choose an archetype where you're like, no, he needs to do it first. And it's like, then you're just pushing away the love, which
Yeah.
doesn't feel good.
Yeah. I remember one student was like, I'm not going to stroke his ego, or like, what am I going to do? Throw him a parade because he helped the kids with the homework? But she became willing. She decided to experiment anyway. And it's so sweet. She's a master relationship coach now. She's one of the best relationship coaches in the world. So she became willing to change her heart and choose that gratitude and thank her husband, even though it does feel very uncomfortable. I think it feels vulnerable if it's not been your habit.
Of course, yes, I think so too. And speaking about vulnerable from a slightly different perspective is what happens when you do express your vulnerability and you maybe start crying because he hurt you and then he stonewalls you and ignores you and shuts down your vulnerability.
The worst. It is the worst. And so vulnerability is, of course, one of the six intimacy skills because without vulnerability, there really can't be any intimacy. It's a little bit like light and dark. So I know for me, this was very confusing because sometimes I would cry and my husband could not. It was like a cruise missile coming in to hug me and comfort me. And other times I would cry and he would do just what you described. He would shut down and he would stonewall and he'd like cross his arms and just be like, rolling his eyes. And I was like, what? Like, what the heck just happened here? I'm being vulnerable.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because vulnerability means undefended. It means and offense is a form of defense. So what I came to realize is that the times that I was crying where there was blame for him
Mhm.
were the times that he was stonewalling it. I thought I was being vulnerable. Tears must be vulnerable. No, not always. Sometimes they were a manipulation on my part. Like I was trying to get him to like, why are you going out when I want you to stay home and pay attention to me? I'm crying, but really, I'm trying to control you. Or, one of our big fights early on was I didn't think he made enough money. And I would complain about that and say, I'm so stressed out about the money because, if only you would make some more. And then I would be crying and he would be 100% unmoved.
Yeah.
So just as you mentioned earlier, like your husband, he's such a good mirror, right? You can tell from his reaction, like you were thinking, I'm not being controlling. And he's like, no, you're being controlling, right? So I can tell also by my husband's response to me, whether my vulnerability is pure or if it's laced with control, blame, or disrespect.
Yes, so good. And that's something I always point out to all women is they think that men aren't sensitive and aware. And I'm like, men are highly sensitive to us. And every partner I've even had, not even just my current, but like has noticed as soon as my energy shifts, they are on top of it and they know. And so it's not true. And you think that they don't. So it's use that mirror and instead of getting mad at them, which it hurt me so bad at the beginning of my relationship when I had this big like trigger and he just walked away and I was like shaking, crying, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I have to leave him. Like this can't be the right man. All those thoughts in my head. And then understanding more, I'm like, okay, that wasn't a pure vulnerability. There was that in there. And it's really hard to swallow that when you're feeling so triggered.
Oh gosh, that sounds so painful. It's so rejecting. It's really lonely and it's just the deepest hurt
Yes.
to because you do feel like you are being vulnerable and you were, right? You're crying, you're shaking.
Mhm.
So there's nothing more painful than that. And it's sometimes it can be tricky to sort out the control from the vulnerability. But I mean, I love your incredible accountability, Lexi, that you of course you do. Your mind does go to like, this is not the right man because he would be tender right now if he was the kind of man I want to spend the rest of my life with. But it's so interesting. Like if it's so empowering. That's what it's been. It's been so empowering to realize like, no, I'm the one that's setting the culture in this relationship. Like all the time. I think it's him. And he's the one that needs to change. And that's why I dragged him to marriage counseling. But actually, just like Dorothy, I had the power all along.
Mm,
But the pain is real. The pain that you were going through,
mm.
I just never want to diminish that. There was nothing more painful in my early marriage than that, what you just described, feeling
Dismissed,
so
rejected.
unloved. Yeah, rejected.
My love, you've built a life, you've built the career, you've built the success. But when it comes to love and softening and receiving, you're always the one in control, always thinking, planning, and doing. What if you didn't have to? Soft Girl Season is your invitation to melt into life where you feel safe, supported, and adored, where you actually can trust men, trust God, and trust yourself. Inside, women have found their dream partners, started receiving clients with less effort, and watched their men step up to pamper, cherish, and adore them, all by learning how to soften into their feminine energy. They've gone from feeling numb and guarded to magnetic, deeply loved, and radiant. So if you're ready to stop over functioning and start being treated like a queen, come inside Soft Girl Season and let yourself be the woman who has it all. Join us using the link in the show notes and receive instant access and start being provided for by God and men. Yeah, and I'd love to talk about how after that moment when you want to go, and which of course I've done a countable amount of times, is explain, you just hit this trigger from my mother, and you explain all the trauma, and then again he doesn't respond, and then you try again another time to explain the story. So can we share?
Oh my gosh. So I call this my malware. Sometimes my malware will run the whole program. And the way I can tell I'm having malware is because it's familiar. And it's something that it feels like it's my husband that's causing this malware. But actually I had it long before we met. And so as I was saying, a big malware that I had was fear of financial insecurity, which I had it like a subscription to Fear of Financial Insecurity Daily. And I read it like multiple times a day. Okay. And it was long before I met my husband. So I had this malware running that it would get triggered sometimes. And I would just run. It felt involuntary. Like I'm about to get crazed about that we don't have enough money. And there's nothing I can do about it because it's real. And it's because we don't have enough money to pay the taxes or whatever it is. Right. So we had lots of ongoing conflict about that until I finally got clear like, oh, this is my own thing. And there's no amount of explaining it to John. He can't fix it. In fact, he would have to break the laws of the universe to come over and rescue me like from my fear somehow, which was all on, I call it my paper, right? Which is my paper is where all my decisions live, like when you're a kid in school and the teacher says like keep your eyes on your own paper, right? You don't have to worry about what the kid next to you is doing. So this malware was running on my paper and it was up to me to arrest it and to notice when it started to run. So to notice when I had that familiar feeling and then find ways to arrest it. Back to the most powerful intimacy skill of all, the gratitude skill. So when I feel that malware starting to run, and from time to time it still does, it's much less frequent now. In fact, it's pretty rare because I have been arresting it for a long time. But if it should start to run, that is a red alert for me to stop everything I'm doing, stop, drop, and drop 10. I call it drop 10. And it's 10 gratitudes. So I have a fear there's not going to be enough. So I start to make a list of the things I'm grateful for. Boy, I'm grateful that I have a home, that I have food in the fridge, that I have money in my purse. I have that overpriced eye cream that means I'm not at risk for premature aging. I have, gas in the car. I have, I would just, it could be a simple list of the things that I'm grateful for. And that would really counter this fear malware that was running. And then I was able to show up in a much more dignified way in my marriage and not feel this compulsion. It really did kind of lift the compulsion to try to explain to my husband so he would get it. And really, by explain, what I meant was get him to agree with me, get him to think the way I think. It really was never about being heard and understood and known and seen. It was about trying to get agreement or trying to change him, which always kind of ended in disaster and was pretty exhausting. So even as I'm telling you this story, I feel tremendous relief that I no longer go on those malware rides. What a great thing to be able to stop those.
Yeah, I'm not there yet, but I'm on the journey.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah.
yeah, it takes time. So, yeah. And something
Yeah.
else that I think I would love to hear is like when you notice your moods are dependent on how connected you feel to your man.
Oh, I definitely had that. In fact, I remember. So, one of the things that I learned from those happy wives was that the indispensable first step of having a great relationship is to be happy, that only happy people have happy relationships. And I'm like, mic drop right there. Like, because I was really committed to my misery at that time. I didn't know I was, but I thought if I was smiling and happy and grateful, my husband would think that the way he was showing up was okay and then he would never change and I would continue to suffer forever. And let's not forget, ever. And so I always wear my little frowny, disapproving face like that. And so I was just always in a mood. And one of the things I learned was that until I got happy, there was never going to be progress in my marriage. And it was up to me to do. So I like things where there's a checkbox. So you know if you did it, right? So I would hear advice like, you have to make yourself happy. You have to love yourself. And I didn't know what that meant. Like, should I hug myself? I just didn't really understand. So I decided to make a list of 20 things that brought me joy, like just frivolous fun, not like 30 minutes of cardio and 5 fruits and vegetables or 8 hours of sleep or whatever. It was just like, just made me feel good. So it could just be playing games on my phone. It could just be like gabbing with my sister, and playing volleyball is definitely one of mine. And okay, that is exercise too, but it just happens to be exercise. Okay. It really is just makes me feel like a kid at recess. And my rule for myself was to do at least 3 of those a day to start getting happy so that I didn't always wear that frowny face. And lo and behold, as soon as I started making myself happy, my husband was drawn to me. He saw me dancing in the kitchen. He wanted to get next to that. And my irresistible magnetism came back. Like, I think he probably felt like there's the woman I fell in love with. That's the one. She wasn't miserable when I married her. Where did she go? Okay, she's back. Great. I'm in.
Yes, it's so simple and it can be frustrating when you hear like really just self-love, like, oh my gosh, but there's a reason that everyone talks about it and that it's really needed, even though it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another area of that I find interesting and confusing is when your man has bad habits and he is complaining about how they affect him, but he doesn't make changes about it. What do you do as a partner?
Oh my gosh. So we certainly have had this one. So this is where you use I call it spouse fulfilling prophecy. It's probably, I mean, it's one of my favorite skills because it's so magical. It works so fast. And so one of the things that was happening around here is my husband has his office in our home and it was getting messy. I mean, it was getting so messy. Like there was like an extra chair where I could go and sit, but I could never sit on it because it was all piled high with junk. And then it got to like I could barely get to that chair. Like it was such a wreck in there. And I started out saying like, gosh, your office is pretty messy, which is just criticism again. Like I'm back to that, right? And I realized like it wasn't working, wasn't getting me what I wanted. So I decided to try to catch him doing something good. So we have cleaning people that come, and right before they would come, he would just clear off his desk. So his desk was not messy. So I decided to focus on that. I was like, oh, your office looks so tidy. So I'm kind of stretching there, right? I'm being generous. Like the rest of the office still, very messy, but his desk was tidy. So I just focused on that. And he was like, yeah. And I go, yeah, look at your desk. It looks really tidy. And I go, yeah, you keep your office really tidy. So I started I kind of just flipped my complaint, right? Your office is a mess became, you keep your office really tidy. So, because what we focus on increases, right? So I started that spouse fulfilling prophecy that he has a tidy office. Anyway, not long after that, he empty his entire office, take everything out of his office. And then he was like, you know what? I think I want to buy new furniture for my office because I like to keep it tidy. And so he did. He bought we went shopping and got some new stuff. And then he organized it and it's been tidy ever since. And I mean, it's really tidy. Like it's so tidy. There's nothing on the chairs. It's very easy to walk to that chair. So I experienced a completely different husband. And I mean, you could argue that what was I even doing, in his office I mean, you could certainly say that wasn't on my paper. I could shut the door or whatever. But I think that there's so much to be said for me choosing my focus wisely. It's the gratitude skill, right? Counting my blessings instead of counting my curses.
Yes, I love it. It's so simple and it helps him be better because I mean we all know that a clean space helps your mind feel more calm and peaceful. So it's a win-win in that situation. And I'd love for you to share the difference of mothering versus being a wife. And let's say he wants support, like taking supplements, and you do leave them out every day, but it kind of feels like mothering. So how can you support him? And yeah, you get it.
Well, that was me. I did not realize that I was being his smother mother early in our relationship. Thought I was being very helpful, but I didn't realize that helpful in wife language is critical in husband language. So I was making his doctor's appointments. I was buying his underwear. I was telling him how to eat healthier. And who was the last person that did that for him? His mother, right? So who did I remind him of? His mother. And are men sexually attracted to their mothers? No, they're not. And so I was contributing to my own, suffering as far as physical intimacy in our relationship because he wanted nothing to do with me. And this is when I learned that the best aphrodisiac on the planet for men is respect. And mothering is never respectful because what respect means to my husband is that I treat him as though he's competent, he's capable, he's smart, he's making great decisions. And when I was mothering him, there was a part of me that was like, I don't think you're going to buy your own underwear. I don't think you're going to go to the doctors as much as you should. And so I'm going to have to take care of this for you. Or I don't think you're going to park in the right spot if I don't tell you. Or I don't think you're not a capable driver. So I'm going to have to tell you which exit to get off the freeway. And so unbeknownst to me, just really killing the passion in my relationship. So it was amazing to me to find out that when I dropped everything that was mothering and just let him be the capable man that I married, right? I wouldn't have married an idiot. Nobody would have married somebody who was not capable and competent. That I became much more attractive to him. And it was actually kind of scary and nerve wracking because he came at me so fast I was getting butterflies in my stomach again, oh my gosh, when I started expecting the best from my husband instead of the worst.
So beautiful. Like when you hear, you're like, why wouldn't we be doing that, right? But it's so unconscious how we treat them in that way.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you didn't have it modeled, right? If the relationship you get trained in the most is your parents.
Yes.
And so if you didn't see respect, and I thought I was being respectful. I was raised knowing wives should be respectful. And I was. I let him know where I was and I reheated his dinner when it came home, he came home late and I thought that was being respectful, but that has nothing to do with what men think is respectful. They just want to be trusted. And actually, there's a great story about one of my first were early students who decided to trust her husband with the cell phone plan. She was like the chief financial officer of a large private school. And she was trying to help her husband with finances at home, kind of mothering him in that regard. And so he came to her and said, what do you want me to do with the cell phone plan? We got to pick a new cell phone plan. And so she just used one of the cheap phrases. She said, oh, whatever you think. And he looked at her like, what are you talking about? Like, who are you? What have you done with my wife? And he was like, I'm not going to fall for this because I don't want to be in trouble later if I, don't do it the way she wants me to do it. So he asked her again, like, no, what do you want me to do with the cell phone plan? And she just stuck with her cheap phrase. She said, no, whatever you think, Doug. And then she added, I trust you. So he went away and made the decision about the cell phone plan. And she was scared that he was going to get crummy service or he was going to overpay, but he did fine. And then that night he came to her, he put his hand on her shoulder and said, you are so nice today. Now they'd been sleeping in separate beds for 6 months.
Yeah.
But as he said that, tears just rolled down her cheeks and they slept in the same bed that very night. And the next day she fired her marriage counselor. She'd been going once a week to complain about Doug for an hour a week, which nobody ever got happier by doing that. Anyway, she started training with me and she still gets tears in her eyes when she talks about how tragic it would have been to throw out this man that she's madly in love with all these years later.
Oh, I love all your stories. They're so beautiful. And it gets to be, and yeah, and like that trust piece is so big. And how do you help women who, let's say, he is like checking out other women in front of you, or like, on social media, following a bunch of women? Like, how do you not lean towards jealousy and worry and rest and trust?
Oh my gosh. It's a challenging one, right? Jealousy it's a form of control. It's a form of fear. And, I was also very controlling, super controlling, and didn't realize it. I think fish are always the last to know that they're in the ocean because I'm used to being wet. So I think some of these things it just seems so normal. Like, of course, it's my right to tell him he's got to unfollow these women on social media or, yeah, to try to control what he's looking at or even what he's thinking about. Right. But we can't really know what our husbands are thinking. And you certainly can't control what he's looking at. And I just remember how frustrating it was for me. Like one thing I did get from marriage counseling was the counselor said I was controlling. I was like, what? We're here to fix my husband. So let's focus on that, but I eventually was like open to it. I'm like, okay, I'm controlling. Okay. I see it. And then I was like, what, how do I stop? What do I do? And she's like, yeah, you just need to be less controlling.
Mm.
Like, and I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't. Like it was like breathing for me to be controlling. So when I developed the now world famous system that I got from these happy wives of learning to relinquish control, I leaned on cheat phrases. And I think there's like 20 cheat phrases in the intimacy skills. And so one of them is that phrase I just talked about, whatever you think, that Kathy Murray was using with her husband, Doug, about the cell phone plan, just to say, whatever you think, as a way of connecting you to the part of your heart that is trusting. And so this is like when we teach children to say please and thank you, we're trying to cultivate a grateful heart, right? So, and do kids always feel grateful when they say, thank you, like we say, thank your dad for doing that, or thank your aunt for that ice cream. They go, thank you, are they grateful? I don't know, but we're trying to train that into them, right? So for me, it's been pretty life-changing to have these skills to lean on, to try to cultivate a trusting heart, a respectful heart, which to be honest, I wasn't even interested in, like, I didn't think I needed that training early on, but now I'm so grateful to be able to, like, when I'm not trusting, I know that I have been disrespectful, to be able to clean that up by apologizing for being disrespectful. So when I think about jealousy, there's certainly an intention to not be controlling, right? Let's say you realize like, oh, I have a malware that says my husband's looking at other women or, interacting with other women, and that is putting me at risk, right? That's the fear talking. And we always get to either choose our fear or our faith. So it could be a good opportunity to drop and do 10 gratitudes for, my husband comes home to me every night. My husband married me and only me, right? Or my husband's always been faithful, if that's the case, right? You can find your gratitude along those lines and kind of counter that fear voice. But I know for me, when the urge to control has been stronger than my desire to be more virtuous, I'm just so grateful I have the ability to apologize that I was disrespectful. And so I think that could go a long way too, is, if you've acted on the jealousy, for me, like I used to, one of the things I would do is try to tell him what to do at work. Like somehow he had his own business and I somehow thought that I was going to be better at running it than he was. And so I would tell him like how to treat a client or something. And I could see on his face immediately, like we'd be having a nice conversation and he would be like, I'm like, oh, what just happened? And then I would slowly start to become accountable and say like, oh, was that disrespectful? Like I didn't want to admit I was disrespectful yet. So I'd like ask it like a question, like, huh? I don't know. And he said, yeah, it was. And then ever so slowly, I said, I apologize for being disrespectful when I told you what to do in your business. Like, you do a great job running that company. He'd had it for like a decade and it was very successful. And as soon as I apologized, as soon as I took that accountability, his face just relaxed again. And our good time was back and the intimacy was back. And that was what I wanted all along. I wanted the closeness and the connection and being able to apologize when I've been controlling, when I've been fearful and serving that instead of choosing my faith. It's really nice to know I can repair so quickly.
It's so beautiful. I'm so grateful that you have all these skills written down for so many of us to learn. And I have to ask the opposite end of what happens when your man is trying to control you and he is telling you what to wear or, how to organize something. How do you?
Yeah. And this is something I never expected. Like I'm controlling. I just share about my own experience that I lean controlling, right? But a lot of women have come to the campus, the Laura Doyle campus saying exactly this, like, I'm not controlling, he's controlling. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't know. Like my husband's pretty laid back. Like that wasn't really part of my experience. Maybe once in a while, right? As a mere mortal person. But what's been fun to see from their stories is there's actually a culture of control in their home. It's not always obvious. Like I remember one student, she was saving money to get away from her marriage because she felt so controlled by her husband. She had a secret stash that she was going to use to escape. So pretty oppressive, right? She felt like threatened. Like she felt like she had to have all the money to make a clean break. Like he was going to be so controlling, he wouldn't like let her get away. And once she learned about her own power, the influence that she has in her marriage, all these cheap phrases, the 6 intimacy skills, she decided to start practicing them in her marriage instead. And she enrolled in relationship coach certification with me. She's now a coach. In fact, she used her getaway money to become a relationship coach. And now she describes her relationship as like romantic, sweet, safe. So here it went from him being so oppressive to her realizing that she was actually trying to control. Like one of the ways she discovered that she was controlling that was not obvious was walking on eggshells. So you think of walking on eggshells as like something like you're doing to accommodate this person who's maybe got a temper issue, but no, you're actually trying to control the way they react, which is still fear. It's still insulting. In fact, I just know for me, when I'm showing up with fear about how someone else is going to react, I tend to get that reaction. And when I'm expecting the best from somebody, I tend to get that reaction too. So I think one of the things that's been kind of amazing to see is how women who felt so controlled are able to use this intimacy skills the same way. And also honoring the times that they feel dismissed or hurt, or, I mean, it feels awful when your husband's telling you what to wear or how to, anything else that really you should feel like you have autonomy over yourself. So I think in a lot of ways, it's been amazing to see the 6 intimacy skills are still the answer if you want to have a playful and passionate relationship.
So beautiful how it can go both ways. And that just keep continuing to see like where is my side of the street, where's, as you keep my paper. And that really shifts because I truly believe the feminine sets the tone and the energy of the relationship. So even if it seems indirectly like him, it's like, okay, let me take this accountability somehow, some way. And
Yeah.
another thing that's like kind of, buzzword or happens is like narcissistic men. So if your man is like more slightly narcissistic or self-obsessed, how to navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, it's incredibly painful, right? To wake up in your marriage and feel like I'm married to somebody who is so self-absorbed and so manipulative and very, likely from what you're reading online is never going to be able to give me the kind of love that I thought I was going to get when I got married, right? What could be more heartbreaking and crushing? Nothing. So, so one of the things that's been really gratifying and just satisfying to watch is the number of the students who arrive on the campus with that exact scenario, with emotional abuse, narcissism. Like one student, Cindy, she came because her husband of like over 30 years had told her he didn't love her anymore. And then he said, I never loved you. So talk about abuse, right? Verbal abuse. And yeah, narcissist. So then he moved out, and then she found out he was having an affair with the bookkeeper.
Mm.
So to say she was heartbroken is like an understatement. But Cindy was in a spot because after 30 years of marriage and they had 3 children and a grandbaby on the way, she just wanted her marriage back, even though all this had happened, all this devastation. So they went to marriage counseling, and it was really frustrating because the counselor told Cindy there was nothing she could do until he dropped the other woman, and he refused. He wasn't going to drop her. So she came to the campus in this totally beaten down state.
Yeah.
And she decided to get support for her marriage at the highest level, which meant coming into relationship coach certification. And she was really nervous because she thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to be a coach because I don't know. I mean, my marriages were separated. He's having an affair. Like, how am I ever going to help anybody else? So it was really exciting during relationship coach certification when he dropped the other woman like pretty quick. And then he got down on one knee with tears in his eyes and begged her forgiveness.
Mm.
And then the whole campus was like celebrating with her. And then we all just were doing cartwheels when he moved back in, and he moved in at Christmas, and their whole family was together, and he gave her a new wedding ring to represent the renewal of their marriage. And now she said their marriage is better than ever. She came on my podcast and told the whole story. It was kind of amazing. And Cindy's not the exception. Cindy is an example of one of many, right? I've had hundreds of podcast guests come on and talk about how they've been able to fix their marriage, and many married to narcissists. So it's like, to paraphrase Thomas Wolfe, miracles not only happen, they happen all the time.
Mm. Mm. Yes, and we also need to hear, because you have a very strong opinion on it, of why marriage counseling is not the way to go.
Oh, well, let's see. Yeah. I just know for me, when I went to marriage counseling, that I was there as the dutiful wife who was going to have the counselor fix her husband. So I wasn't there to improve myself. I was just there to blame my husband further. So it was very hypocritical. And then I also just remember that I did a lot of focusing on what was wrong in my marriage. I certainly spent it focusing on my husband's faults.
Mhm.
And then when we'd have a fight on the way home from marriage counseling, it was because I was feeling so hopeless that things were ever going to improve. And so in retrospect, I thought it was us, that marriage counseling just wasn't working for us. So it was incredibly discouraging for us to go to marriage counseling and thinking that we were the problem.
Mhm.
Maybe I just really had married the wrong man. It kind of reinforced that dark view of the world that I had at that time. But actually, I have since found out that most traditional marriage counseling is ineffective. Like the majority of couples who go end up getting divorced afterwards and feeling that sense of hopelessness that they'll never be able to repair. And in my view now that I've learned what actually is effective to have a great marriage, because it's been done in the trenches with real women and real relationships, and not just from maybe a theoretical view of marriage or like a certificate on the wall kind of thing. I know that the structure of marriage counseling is actually pretty toxic. If you're going to get together and focus on the hurts and the pain and the what's wrong and be indulged in terms of blaming, that's actually going to have the opposite effect of the one that you want to have. And it's funny, we did a state of relationships survey recently where we talked to 600 women, and asked them if they had been to marriage counseling, and about 40% of them had. And of those 40%, 87% said either it didn't help at all or that the improvement that they had from marriage counseling didn't last for like a year later. They were just right back to where they had started or worse. So it was really kind of discouraging and sad to hear that because we invested a lot of time and energy and money into marriage counseling. And I think it's interesting when women arrive at the campus, they do feel that their relationship is hopeless. And sometimes it's because they've had a professional tell them that they need to get divorced. I have so many students with heartbreaking stories of, their husband being diagnosed as a narcissist and her saying, you have to leave, you have to break up your family. And that can be so influential when you're feeling so vulnerable. So, our stand on the Laura Doyle campus is that if you have any hope at all that your marriage can be saved, then we do too. And we're standing for it. We're on a mission to end world divorce. Whatever it takes to fix your marriage, we're here for that. And we've seen too many miracles to doubt that marriages can be not just saved, but really put right, made intimate and passionate and peaceful and playful and hot again. And that's the kind of marriage nobody wants a divorce from.
Mm. Oh, it's so, so beautiful. Truly just angel work right there that you have this mission and you're actually executing it. So I love it so much. And also, I would love for you to share with everyone the one question that you should never ask a man.
Well, it's unfortunately, this is another, what is it? If you can't be a good example, you just have to be a horrible warning. So, this is something I used to do all the time with my husband. I would sit him down on the couch for the State of the Union address to talk about our relationship. And really, my secret goal was for him to say how much he loved me, how special I am, how beautiful I am, how wonderful I am, how no one's ever loved anyone more than he loves me. But instead, I put on my junior therapist hat and I would ask him how he feels. And I would try to talk about like his childhood issues because I thought this was going to result in intimacy. This was part of what we were doing in counseling, right? It's trying to get down to, tell me about your childhood or whatever. So I would say, well, how do you feel? And then my husband would say, hungry? Or sometimes he would say, like, with my hands. And I was so upset about that because I thought, he doesn't know how he feels. And that means he's like emotionally stunted and he's never going to be able to have the kind of intimacy and connection with me that I thought I was going to get when we got married. And I have since learned that one of the 5 gifts of the feminine is emotional brilliance. They did a study at the University of Toronto and they found out, and I'm glad you're sitting down for this, Lexy, because they found out that women are more emotional than men. Shocking, right? That is our gift. And my relationship depends on me having that emotional brilliance. And the world depends on it too. And if I'm turning that question to him, I'm asking the wrong person. So it's really a question for me to show up with. It's like, how am I feeling? And also, what are my desires? That's another one of the gifts of the feminine, of the 5. So I have since learned that when I'm tempted to ask how he's feeling, it's really like a string that I pull. And I think, oh, Laura, how are you feeling? And it's like, oh, I'm feeling sad about something, or I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, or I'm feeling tired, whatever it is. If I could honor my feelings and express those, my husband's incredibly responsive. And that's where I find that intimacy and that connection, and where he comes in like a cruise missile for the hug or as to be my hero and rescue me from whatever has me feeling stressed out or sad.
Mm. Mm. Thank you for that. And for all the women that aren't married, how to know if the man they're dating is worth being their husband or the right man to be their husband.
Wow, that's a definite loaded question, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, I think one of the things for me that was when I was on the fence in my marriage, trying to decide if I was going to stay married or not, there could be no intimacy because you can't have it from the fence, right? You got to jump down one side or the other. And I was showing up with my fear, like, I don't think this relationship's going to work out. And of course, that permeated and kind of poisoned the culture in my home. Certainly, if you're still in a getting to know you phase of your dating, that's certainly, a time to be checking with your heart a lot, right? Like, how do I feel? What do I want? Right? Asking yourself those two powerful questions. But there's so much to be said from deciding, like choosing your faith and saying, you know what, I'm going all in on this. This is my person. And then seeing what intimacy and connection looks like from that space where there's the emotional safety that you're both wanting. I had a student where this happened. She desperately desired to be a mother, and she had always been a pursuer in her relationships. So not taking them in feminine receptive mode, but really just deciding that her partners always needed help getting that relationship started, and that they would always be so great if she would just get it started. And so she was finding herself never getting proposed to and never getting to be the mom that she wanted to be. And she was in her early 40s. The clock was really ticking. She was considering using a sperm donor to just have that child by herself. But she came into relationship coach certification, trained at the highest level on the skills, ended the relationship with this guy who was telling her he just, wasn't ready to propose, wasn't ready to be a dad. And so she thought, oh, well, I'm definitely going to have to get a sperm donor. I'm not going to be able to get a new relationship so quickly. But just the opposite happened. She decided to be open. She went on a date with a guy, and she was very upfront with her desire to be a mother. And right away, he said, you know what? I'd like to be a father to your child, whether I'm the biological one or not. And then he said, hey, actually, I'd like to move in together. And she was like, you know what? I don't really want to move in. I would like to be married. And they'd only been dating for like a really short time. I want to say like less than 2 months. And I hope I have that right. I think it's pretty close. And he was like, you mean you want to get married? And she was like, yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. And then he was like, all right. He goes, will you marry me? And she was like surprised. She's like, yes, yes, I will. Anyway, they got pregnant right away. She has a beautiful baby now. And she was 7.5 months pregnant and 43 years old when she got married. And she is just so joyful. And she's having this wonderful experience in the marriage, feeling so supported by her, like she says, she has the most amazing husband, the most wonderful husband. So it had a lot to do with how she showed up, and deciding that you have the right person in front of you is a big part of it.
Mm. Thank you so much for all these beautiful success stories and just showing what's possible. I think this is what helps people the most, is knowing that it can happen and there can be a change, and give them that hope. That's what we need, that faith so, so deeply. The last question of the podcast is sharing one or two of your favorite romantic memories.
Oh, well, one that comes to mind is when my first book came out and was such a big media sensation. I was doing a lot of traveling around the country and the world, actually, to take advantage of getting to be on the Today Show and The View and all these shows. When I would come home, my husband would pick me up from the airport and, of course, give me a passionate kiss and everything. And then as we walked into the house, there was like a whole, I don't know, shrine or something built for me. It was like beautiful bouquet of roses, and then like little teddy bears around the table, and just other little presents. So it was a big surprise at first, like, oh, wow. And then it just became like a ritual where there was always this shrine to Laura when I'd been gone. And I just thought it was so sweet and thoughtful. And then, yeah, it was just an incredible way to be welcomed home. Even maybe I'd only been gone for a day or 2 days or something, but I would always get this incredible, I would feel like I was missed, and he was happy to see me again. And then the other one that comes to mind is one time we were watching this movie, and I forget really the details of the movie. There was some romances in the movie. And I remember it just prompted my husband to talk about when he was single and he was dating, and he was talking about how he knew that he had this precious gift to give. Like he knew that he wanted to be of service, and like to have, like a princess to take care of, to be her hero. And he was like emotional talking about how it was until he found it, it was like it was frustrating. And then when he found me, and I was so receptive to him being my hero, that it just had to be me. It was like that conversation. It was like the things that I had wanted him to say during those State of the Union addresses. But it just kind of came up in a quiet moment after a movie that he got inspired to tell me why I was so precious to him.
Oh, that's so cute. I love it's seriously one of my favorite things, seeing the cutie side of men and when they just express that part. It's like
So tender.
that
Yeah, it really stuck
tenderness.
with me.
Aw, amazing. Well, thank you again for everything today. And I know many people are going to want to learn from you. So where can they find you? What do you have for them?
I made something special just for your listeners. So everybody needs the free Adored Wife Roadmap for sure, right? We made a special URL for just the listeners of this podcast to really get more of the 6 intimacy skills, and especially the free Adored Wife Roadmap at connect.lauradoyle.org/alive to enjoy, just for the listeners of this podcast. So go and grab that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And what else do you have for people that might be interested in learning more?
Well, I love if you need inspiration and want to hear more about how women have applied the skills to overcome some very challenging situations in their marriage, affairs, separations, threat of divorce, addictions, and more. The Empowered Wife podcast, I've interviewed hundreds of empowered wife students, women who have been practicing the intimacy skills in their marriage. And you can listen to that, or you can watch it on YouTube, or you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you, Lexy. What an honor to get to be on your show.
You made it to the end of the episode, so now it's time for our snuggly heart breath of the day. Place a hand or both hands, if it's safe to do so, over your heart and take a big breath into your heart center. Open your mouth and let it go. I'm so grateful to have shared this time with you. If you enjoyed this combo, please share with your besties and your fam. And if you're a visual person like me, fly over to YouTube and watch the video. If you want to do a random act of kindness today, please leave a 5-star review so more people in the world can get their heart snuggled. You're helping tremendously when you do this, so thank you so much. And as a gift for doing so, I'll give you my Soften Your Heart Medi that feels like an exhale and a hug from within. When you leave a review and email me the screenshot to heartsnuggles@alivetoenjoy.com, you can also find the email in the show notes and you'll get the free meditation. Sending you the warmest, comfiest hug and lots of unexpected blessings your way. Remember that every single person just wants to be loved. So how can you be loved today?